How do you find hope in times of social unrest? So here's my basic argument. Times of social unrest often have an imbalance between building and destroying, where there's a lot of destruction, but not many people coming in to do the hard work to actually build something worthwhile. My hypothesis is that the best way to find hope in times of unrest is to be personally involved in efforts of building. A lot of times during times of unrest, what people will do is they will disengage from the toxicity and the anger and the destruction and the hostility. And they'll do that for their own personal sanity and mental health. There's great reasons to do that. But I think there's also reasons why that doesn't work. And part of that has to do with the fact that a lot of times the social unrest has just causes. And your conscience kind of knows there are problems that need to be solved. And that by disengaging, you're taking yourself out of the solution set. So disengaging really is not a satisfying way of finding hope. However, when you have a place of legitimate building for addressing some of the problems that are causing the social unrest, then you can actually choose to disengage. You can choose to say no to the toxicity, and those choices are actually a way of building up energy that you can then channel into the constructive efforts. So your conscience doesn't nag you in the same way when you disengage if you have a positive outlet for being part of the solution. All right, first of all, what do I mean when I say there's an imbalance of building and destroying? Well, times of social unrest tend to be times when people deeply feel the injustices of the structure of society. And they spend a lot of time sort of going after people and sort of tearing down systems, some of which need to be torn down, and others of which maybe don't, or maybe the tearing down is happening prematurely. There's also a lot of articulation of the problem, but not a lot of people are pointing to real solutions to the problem. And a lot of the energy that's going around the population tends to be anger-oriented energy. Now, I want to say I do think there is a place for destruction. In some cases, the injustices are so deeply entrenched into the system that there's no other way of actually fixing the problem than destroying the institutions in existence or destroying some part of them. So I think there are cases where destruction is necessary. Also, destruction can sort of prompt people into action. Sometimes people will just sort of let problems go under the radar, not really notice them, until they become personally meaningful to the people at the top. And doing a lot of destruction is sometimes necessary for the people at the top to feel personally involved, to feel like action is necessary now. So destructive forces absolutely do have a place. But the times in history when they have gone the best tend to be where the destructive forces are paired with positive, constructive forces that are grounded in good ethical values. And my example here is Malcolm X, who was more of a destructive force, and Martin Luther King, who was more of a grounded in ethical principles force. There was some tension between those two perspectives. But the fact that they existed at the same time, were working on the same problem, made that force a really good force for good and power and long-run helpful change. By the way, I should also mention the problems that are real in society that I think people are rightly upset about. There's a lot of issues with inequality, with upward mobility in a system that tends to serve people who are already at the top and tends to lock out people who were born in lower income circumstances. Racism, corruption within institutions that seems to be going unacknowledged. People at the top of society hoarding power and protecting their interests. All of those things, I think, have legitimate grievances behind them. The problem here is when we have a lot of destruction without building, that leaves a power void for people to come in and use for their own interests. And if there aren't good, grounded people who have sorted through their values, sorted through their purposes, who hold each other accountable, if there isn't something like that that's willing to come in and fill the power void, sometimes that power void can be filled with people who are just power hungry. And that can leave things sometimes even worse than they were before the destruction happened. And the imbalance of building and destroying is natural because destroying things feels powerful. It is powerful. It's immediate results. It can, in some cases, be fairly easy to destroy. Destroying takes a second, building takes years. There's also something in the human soul that responds really well to comeuppance. We like to see people put in their place if they deserve it. So destruction is easy. Building is hard. Building requires risk-taking and failure, and building relationships, working through conflict, making trade-offs, dealing with complexities you didn't expect, dealing with setbacks. There are so many parts of building that are more on the discouraging side and definitely on the slow side. But I think being a builder is worthwhile. And part of that is if you're trying to be either a builder or a destroyer, you can guarantee destruction is going to happen. It's too juicy, it's too delicious. Other people will take care of the destruction. The act of integrity is to choose the route of building. So what do I mean by building? What are some practical ways of building during a time of social unrest? Part of this, I think, needs to happen in communities. And I'm talking about small communities, like 5 people, 8 people, 12 people. These need to be communities who build trust with each other, who support each other, who know each other, who have shared values that they wrestle with, that they try to figure out what constructive actions can we take together. And some communities in this category include church small groups, include blockchain communities that are trying to build tools to make the future happen. I'm sure mosques and synagogues also have their own version of small groups. Community service outlets can be like this. For example, a community garden in a part of the city that doesn't have fresh foods, homeless shelters where you can volunteer, food banks. All of these are places where people can come together and do basic constructive things to make things better. Other acts of building might involve you developing skill sets that can be used in moments when we need people with those skills. Studying justice, getting a law degree, learning to code, networking with people who share similar values. Building that kind of skill set is part of a constructive solution. And finally, building can involve forms of entrepreneurship. And by entrepreneurship, I don't just mean starting a business, although some businesses I do think can be a constructive part of the solution. Entrepreneurship can involve you starting your own community group, or you building your own system. Those are types of entrepreneurship that sort of fall under this category of having a constructive way of addressing the problem. I do think there can be good forms of social media, even though I complain a lot about social media on this channel. For example, positive uses of social media might include connecting with people that you then build relationships with offline, or finding people who are doing constructive things that you can get involved with. We need a sense of hope, and that hope has to be paired with a sense of personal empowerment. I don't think the sense of hope is going to be good enough if it's just some ray of hope out there that is disconnected from us personally, disconnected from our agency. So this is just my general advice for how do you find hope when there's a lot of social unrest.